Hey, Frog Prince Rana here, and thank you for dropping by. I promise, one of these days, I will have a video with good news. But today is not that day. We will be visiting one of the most controversial topics, something that we have known about since early 19th century. In the 1960s, the evidence became increasingly convincing, yet somehow managed to ignore it nevertheless. Yes, we're talking about climate change today. Like everything else in life, people are divided in this subject. There are those who completely denies our impact on the climate. Some of us remember February 26, 2015, the day that gave us the snowball on the floor of the Senate. On this day, Senator James Inhofe, chair of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, appeared with a snowball on the Senate floor to demonstrate once and for all that climate change is a hoax.
In case we have forgotten, because we keep hearing that 2014 has been the warmest year on record, I asked the chair, you know what this is? It's a snowball, and that's just from outside here. So it's very, very cold out, very unseasonal. So here, Mr. President, catch this.
Then we have those who agrees that we do have an impact on the climate, but the impact is not that bad. A good friend of mine, we agree on many things, holds this view. One of his argument is, before we started our shit, there were billions of bison in the savannah. I will come back to that point later. Finally, there is the alarmist group. The one shouts, we're all doomed unless we do something now. How to put it mildly? I belong to this group. At the same time, I will admit there are some problems with us. But first, let's get to the bad news. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's massive new report, published last week, makes it absolutely clear that the climate crisis isn't waiting for us in some far-off future. It is here right now. It is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean and land, the report says. Widespread and rapid changes in the atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere and biosphere have occurred. And we know what got us here. Decades of greenhouse gas pollution, chiefly from the fossil fuel industry. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, is an intergovernmental body of the United Nations mandated to provide objective scientific information relevant to understanding human-induced climate change, its natural, political, and economic impacts and risk, and possible response options. It was established in 1988 by the World Meteorological Organization (WMO) and the United Nations Environment Programme (UNEP), with subsequent endorsement by the United Nations General Assembly the same year. The IPCC does not conduct original research nor monitor climate change. Rather, it undertakes a systematic view of all relevant published literature to provide a comprehensive update on climate change, its effects, and potential strategies. Thousands of scientists and other experts volunteered to review and summarize the data, which can span tens of thousands of studies, and compile key findings into assessment reports. It has been described as the biggest peer review process in the scientific community. The actual document is over 4,000 pages. For us non-voracious readers, they have also compiled a 2-page document with headline statements. All the links are in the description below. Before we get to that summary document, there are some things we need to cover first. The most important being the magic number 1.5 degrees centigrade and 2 degrees centigrade. Since 2009, more than 100 small island developing states, least developed countries, and many others have been calling for limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels to prevent the worst of climate change impacts. The inclusion of a 1.5 degree centigrade temperature limit in the 2015 Paris Agreement was a major victory for vulnerable countries. One thing to understand here is temperature change is not uniform across the globe. In many regions, warming has already surpassed 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. More than 1/5 of all human lives in regions that have already seen warming greater than 1.5 degrees Celsius in at least one season. Climate-related risks were found to be generally higher at lower latitudes and for disadvantaged people and communities. Most land regions will see more hot days, especially in the tropics. At 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, about 14% of Earth's population will be exposed to severe heat waves at least once every 5 years, while at 2 degrees warming, that number jumps to 37%. Extreme heat waves will become widespread at 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius would reduce the number of people frequently exposed to extreme heat waves by about 420 million, with about 65 million fewer people exposed to exceptional heat waves. At Earth's mid-latitudes, the hottest day will be up to 3 degrees Celsius hotter at 1.5 degrees Celsius warming and up to 4 degrees Celsius warmer at 2 degrees Celsius warming. The warmest extreme temperature will be in Central and Eastern North America, Central and Southern Europe, the Mediterranean including Southern Europe, Northern Africa and the Near East, Western and Central Asia, and Southern Africa. Longer warm spells will affect many densely populated regions. At warming above 1.5 degrees Celsius, twice as many megacities as today are likely to become heat-stressed, potentially exposing 350 million more people by 2050. At 2 degrees Celsius warming, the deadly heat waves India and Pakistan saw in 2015 may occur annually. In Earth's high latitudes, the coldest nights will be about 4.5 degrees Celsius warmer at 1.5 degrees of warming, compared to about 6 degrees Celsius warmer at 2 degrees of warming. Arctic land regions will see cold extremes warm by as much as 5.5 degrees Celsius at 1.5 degrees Celsius warming or less, while at warming of 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, cold extremes will be up to 8 degrees Celsius warmer. Cold spells will also be shorter. The report finds that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is expected to significantly reduce the probability of droughts and risk related to water availability in some regions, particularly in the Mediterranean, including Southern Europe, Northern Africa, and the Near East, and in Southern Africa, South America, and Australia. About 61 million more people in Earth's urban areas would be exposed to severe drought in a 2 degrees Celsius warmer world than at 1.5 degrees warming. Up to 50% fewer people on Earth may see increased climate change-induced water stress by limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, depending on future socioeconomic conditions, though the degrees will vary regionally. People in river basins, especially in the Middle and Near East, would be particularly vulnerable. When it comes to sea level increase, it is projected to be 0.1 meters lower at 1.5 degrees Celsius warming than at 2 degrees. If warming reaches 2 degrees Celsius, more than 70% of Earth's coastline will see sea level rise greater than 0.2 meters, resulting in increased coastal flooding, beach erosion, salinization of water supplies, and other impacts on human and ecological systems. About 10.4 million fewer people would be exposed to this risk by year 2100 at the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, assuming humans don't adapt. Risks are projected to be highest in South and Southeast Asia, but sea level rise will significantly impact areas all around the world to varying degrees. There are a lot more risks that would impact us humans, including heat-related illness and mortality, vector-borne diseases, and food security. Maybe I should also give a very simple explanation on what this climate change is. Let's start with greenhouse gases. These are gases in Earth's atmosphere that trap heat. They let sunlight pass through the atmosphere, but they prevent the heat that the sunlight brings from leaving the atmosphere. The main greenhouse gases are water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, ozone, nitrous oxide, and chlorofluorocarbons. Obviously, the more of these gases we have in the atmosphere, the more heat would be trapped and increase the global temperature. Impact of this increase is what we call climate change. Now, these gases do dissipate over time, and here is the kicker. Two of the most offending gases, excluding water vapors, are carbon dioxide and methane. The thing is, methane has a large effect, but for a relatively brief period, having an estimated mean half-life of 9.1 years in the atmosphere, whereas about 50% of a carbon dioxide increase will be removed from the atmosphere within 30 years, and a further 30% will be removed within a few centuries. The remaining 20% may stay in the atmosphere for many thousands of years. And our human activities have increased carbon dioxide emissions by many folds. It really comes down to our need for power source, which has gone crazy since the uptake of cryptocurrency. Bitcoin consumes more electricity than Argentina. Let's not even get into NFT and its carbon footprint. 65% of carbon dioxide is contributed from fossil fuel and industrial processes. 11% comes from forestry and other land use. 16% comes from methane. Now, going back to my friend's comment on the bison. We all know cow farts are a huge contributor to methane emission. Here is a breakdown of methane emission in USA. 27% of it is enteric fermentation, a very posh way of saying digestive process in ruminant animals that produces methane. But as the half-life of methane is a relatively brief period of 9.1 years, it is easy to understand why all the bison in savanna didn't contribute as much as we're doing to greenhouse gases. As contributors, China is number one with 28% contribution to greenhouse gas, followed by USA with 15%. Looking at US energy consumption, petroleum is the highest used source at 37% and coal at 11%. These are the highest offender on CO2 emission. In screen, we can see the emission rate for various energy sources. Natural gas is quite down in the list compared to the rest. Obviously, the other energy sources we have includes hydroelectric power, which itself can have a huge impact for environment. We have wind power that has potential to reduce, fragment and degrade habitats for wildlife, fish and plants. Then nuclear energy, which does not produce carbon emissions directly, but the constructions of plants, uranium mining and manufacturing operations all produce CO2 emissions on a huge scale. But in any case, these are perhaps still better than fracking, which can poison groundwater, pollute surface water, impair wildlife, and threaten wildlife. As I said, we are doomed. Finally, let's look at the summary document and call it a day for the gloomy video. We have already covered a lot of the points, so we will just look at the part on how to limit future climate change. From a physical science perspective, limiting human-induced global warming to a specific level requires limiting cumulative carbon dioxide emission, reaching at least net zero CO2 emissions, along with strong reductions in other greenhouse gas emissions. Strong, rapid and sustained reductions in CH4 emissions would also limit the warming effect resulting from declining aerosol pollution and would improve air quality. Unfortunately, as individuals, we cannot really do anything to make a dent here. The major contributors have always been large operations such as transportation. We might feel mighty good by using electric car, but in reality, electric car relies on regular charging from the local electricity network. The power plants providing that energy aren't emission-free. Even in California, 60% of electricity comes from burning fossil fuels in 2015, while solar and wind together made up less than 14%. We can only in reality raise awareness and with enough of us, maybe actually get the governments around the world to take this crisis seriously. I wish I had something better to add here. Well, that's all for this video. If you think it's a worthwhile video to share and to ensure YouTube suggests it, please leave a like, comment and even share it around. If you want to be super awesome, please consider subscribing so you can be updated with my new contents. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. Wherever you are, have a safe day. Signing off.